Welcome everybody to the VacCAP webinar series. My name is Amaya Tucha and I'm a member of the VacCAP team and I will be moderating today's webinar. Today we'll be discussing would consumers accept CRISPR fruit crops if the benefit has health implications? An application to cranberry products with Dr. Karina Gallardo. Dr. Gallardo is a professor and an extension specialist in the School of Economic Sciences at Washington State University. She is stationed at the Puyallup Research and Extension Center. Dr. Gallardo's primary research and outreach program goal is to enhance value-added agribusiness opportunities for specialty crops. So we are very excited to have Karina with us today presenting on this research that we've been waiting to hear about, and it's a very exciting area of research. I wanted to remind everybody that is participated to please stay muted, and if you could please turn off your cameras during the presentation. We will have all of our questions through either the chat box or the Q&A option on Zoom, so you can go ahead and add some of your questions as Karina is presenting, and we will be answering them at the end of the presentation. So with that, I will just let Karina start sharing her screen and start the webinar. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Amaya, for the invitation. This is a study that we did about 3 years ago, and I have to acknowledge my co-authors, mainly my former PhD student, Huijin Ma, and then my co-authors, Elizabeth Canales, Amaya Atucha, Juan Salapa, I'm sorry, and Massimo Lloriso. There is a typo in that slide, it's Juan Salapa. So the title of the study is, will consumers accept CRISPR fruit crops if the benefit has health implications? These are going to be introductory slides. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what I know or my understanding or my literature review of genetic engineering and CRISPR. As you know, genetic engineering is a type of breeding technology and is the one that it is consistently seen as suspicious by consumers due to different reasons, right? But it is the one food technology that consumers consistently reject due to different reasons. And even though the scientific community has proven or has communicated that there is no risk for human health or to the environment, consumers still are suspicious and rejectful of this. And this lack of wide acceptance by consumers has hindered the full potential of all what these technologies can contribute or provide to the agri-food industry and to society in general, okay? So within this, CRISPR is a type of breeding technology, but we have to emphasize here that CRISPR is different from genetic engineering, and the difference basically centers in the fact that there is no insertion of foreign DNA, right? CRISPR stands for Cluster Regular Interspace Palindromic Repeats. Cas9 is the one that we focus in this study. It has been studied. There are dozens of studies for applications of CRISPR-Cas9 in different agricultural crops, and there are some of them being already commercially produced. So the speed of the applications and the commercial is really, really fast. So I was doing this lead review in 2020, 2021. I am sure that by 2024, there has been some advances and progress in what other applications and what other commercial products might be there. Okay, the other part of the study is sorry. On the, okay. Oh, I'm going up. Okay. Is talking about this new FDA regulation, new as of 2020 regulation about the addition of these added sugar lines in the nutrition fact panel. Okay, so usually the nutrition fact panel is this information that it is in processed foods that indicates, you know, the number of calories, the content of different elements like fat, sugar, sodium, cholesterol, etc. Right, and also vitamins and calcium, iron, and things like that. So what the FDA mandated was that all products need to not only have the total number of sugars, but also an additional line that specifies added sugars. Okay, so there has been different studies, and also industry has said that, okay, people are usually confused, and added sugars may imply some negative connotation to the product. And yes, this has been also, there have been other studies that I listed there that have proven that, right? That they have some negative connotation, added sugar, not necessarily something that consumers are looking for. Cranberries. So cranberries are usually are a really good example of this controversy about the effect of the added sugar on how consumers perceive the product, right? For one side, we have cranberries are a superfood, right? They have high content of phytochemical components, proven positive effects on the health, on human health. There are numerous studies that have promoted that have sustained and demonstrated that, but at the same time, they are difficult for the palate. They cannot be eaten as that because they are extremely acid. Therefore, there is a need to add sugars to counterbalance this and make them more palatable, okay? But if we are having products that need to say added sugar, this will be seen negative by the consumer. So which one the consumer will be doing? Are they gonna be confused? Are they gonna stop thinking that these products are healthy? Or they are going to keep consuming them? What is going to happen in the mind? What is the behavioral changing in the consumer after this change in the rule? So a possible solution for this is from the breeding side, and actually that is VacCAP is a project that deals with breeding and genetic markers. Please, I want to emphasize that VacCAP doesn't do GMO, doesn't do CRISPR. VacCAP is mainly focused on conventional breeding, okay? So, but still, we wanted to investigate what consumers, how they will react if they will be in front of a breeding technology that it is so not well known. CRISPR is relatively new, still not conventional breeding, different from conventional breeding, but not genetic modification, not GMO. And if there will be some sort of some change of behavior, if they knew this will bring a direct benefit to them. So there are studies that say in the applied economics literature that say that part of the rejection of consumers towards new plant breeding technologies, namely GMO, is because the initial applications of these technologies did not directly affect consumers, right? It was the herbicide tolerant. It was the highly productive. There were things that they really cannot experience themselves. There is some current of literature that says that if the benefit is directly tangible by consumers, then their attitudes, their negative perceptions might change or might not. So that is what we are trying to investigate, and that is the title of this study. What if we don't need to add that much sugars to the cranberries? Would your perception about CRISPR change or not? That is what we are trying to investigate in this study. So what do we know so far? As I was talking, consumers in general want to avoid genetic modified foods. With respect to gene editing in general, they are somewhat less rejectful or have somewhat a more positive attitude compared to genetic modification. Still, they want to discount if we compare genetic gene editing and conventional breeding. Still they would prefer the conventional breeding, but it is not such an overwhelming negative reaction as there is for genetic modification itself. That is, there have been different studies in applied economics applied to different types of crops, like Xu did the study on rice, Muringai did on apples, Muringai did on potatoes, Jan and Hobbs did it on apples, Maret did it on apples, Childers and Caputo did it on milk. So across different crops, the finding is consistent. Still, some sort of discount with respect to conventional breeding, but the discount is not that high as compared to genetic modification. Now, what is the effects of information? In a world with social media, with consumers are exposed to different sources of information, how does information plays a role in consumers' perceptions or acceptance of these new technologies? So, as expected, information, if it's positive, if you explain what are these technologies about, what are the benefits they are associated with, then consumers they respond to it and show more acceptance of these technologies. That is the case of the studies that I'm citing here, right? Childers and Caputo, Hu, Podell, in general, if they are told, look, this is what CRISPR is about, and they have more information about it, they will be more accepting of it. And especially if they know about the benefits that this technology will be associated with. For example, the study there of Childers and Caputo, they were studying this situation of cows that have horns. And as you know, traditional dehorning cows is very painful, and people are concerned about animal welfare. But there is a potential to do gene editing to breed cows that will not have horns, that there will not be a need to painfully dehorn the poor cow. So if the consumer really cares about, the animal welfare, they show that they are more acceptant of the gene editing. But still, there is a group of core rejectors that they are, no matter what benefit it involves, they will still not accept. There is another group that, yes, based on the benefit associated, yes, they will be more acceptant. And there is a group that they will accept no matter what, they really don't care. So there are three types of consumers, and that is consistent in most of the studies that we have reviewed. So in this study, we have three objectives. One is to estimate the willingness to pay. That is a term that I will be using a lot in this presentation, WTP, willingness to pay, for gene editing compared to conventional breeding. And we also added some other attributes there, like regular content of sugar versus reduced content of sugar, and then throw in flavor intensity, because flavor is something that consumers are always care about, right? So when we did a study in other crops, namely fruits, and we put healthy considerations, nutrition considerations, chemical applications, safety concerns, and taste trumps everything else. So if it tastes good, they will be acceptance of that crop. That they don't put a higher priority on other stuff. They are very concerned on taste. So that's why we put taste or flavor intensity here. The second objective is estimate the health-related information treatment. So we explicitly put information blurbs about how healthy or how good for human health is the consumption of cranberries, and then a different treatment telling them, look, added sugars might have these effects on your health. And then we wanted to see how these different information types, the positive and the negative, affects the perception of the acceptance on different breeding technologies. And then there also is that not all consumers are the same. There are heterogeneity. So in our sample of consumers, we wanted to see if there were respondent segments. Who accepts, who is indifferent, who has a weak rejection, and who are the ones who strongly reject the technology. So in general, we found that yes, consumers are willing to pay less for regular sugar content. They will pay a price premium for products, cranberry products that have reduced sugar content. They are willing to discount for CRISPR compared to conventional breeding, and obviously for a weak bland flavor compared to a full intense. That is when we analyze. So our technique, our statistical and econometric model allows us to isolate each attribute. Like I isolate the breeding type, I isolate the sugar content, and I isolate the flavor. But also it allows us to estimate the willingness to pay in a bundle. So if we have a bundle of all the attributes together, and we bundle together reduced sugar content, CRISPR bred, and full intense flavor, and compare to the counterpart, which is regular sugar content, conventional breeding, and weak flavor, in a bundle, they favor the reduced sugar content, CRISPR bred, and full flavor. Of course, they favor that rather than the other one, showing that if the reduced sugar and the full flavor are present, they are willing to accept the CRISPR bred cranberries. And then the other one is the information, right? So we have the health benefits and recommendations to limit sugar intake. Both pieces of information actually decrease the acceptance of consumers' willingness to pay for the regular sugar content, and also this was higher for the reductions in the willingness to pay for CRISPR. So that are the general findings, and now I'm going to talk about what we did, the study. So in December 2020 through March of 2021, we surveyed nationwide a sample of 2,000 consumers in the United States. Who were our sample? They needed to be 18 years or older. They needed to be representative of the US population, or the closest as they could. We work with Qualtrics, which is a really a company that does this type of studies, and they have a really large consumer panel base. And we were able to tell them we want respondents who are representative in age, income, and gender distribution of the US population, so we can compare and perhaps make generalizations compared to the US Census. But we also include some criteria, like they will have to have consumed dried cranberries in the last year, okay? But so we did this study for dry cranberries and cranberry juice. So for the dry cranberries, we said we want them to have consumed dried cranberries at least once in the past year, okay? We wanted here to attract really loyal, frequent consumers, and perhaps the occasional consumer, but that has consumed at least once that they could remember the dry cranberry. And for the juice, we were more specific, and that is going to be reflected in our results. Why? Because for the juice, we decided to differentiate the different types of juice. We use the 100% cranberry juice, the cocktail, and the blend, right? That cran-apple, cran-grape. So these different types of juice, and not every consumer is aware of these differences, okay? So we had to screen out only for those consumers who are really aware of these different types of cranberry juices, okay? So that's why we have different results. The cranberry juice, just a spoiler alert, is a little more picky than the dry cranberry consumer in our results. So that was our criteria to select our sample of respondents, and we used 2,000 individuals in total that were separated in two groups. 1,000 responded for the dry cranberries, and the other 1,000 responded for the juice. Now, within 1,000, that 1,000 that responded for the SDC, sweet and dry cranberries, we divided them in 4 groups, because we wanted to have different treatments. So 250 were the control, the other 250 received information about the health benefits of the cranberries, the other 250 received information about the dietary impacts of consumer sugars, and then the 4th group received a mix of information to see which one has a higher effect, the negative or the positive, okay? So we have those 4 treatments, and then the survey. The main part of the survey is what I'm going to explain next, but we asked questions about cranberry purchase habits, like why do you like to consume cranberries, how frequent you consume, what time of the day do you consume it as a snack, etc. for both dry and cranberry use. If they understand the nutrition fact label, that we actually did an exercise for them to respond to compare total sugar and added sugar content, and to see if they understand what added sugar means, because some people think that the added sugar goes beyond, if there is some other sugar has a higher content than what the total sugar said. So we actually tested, and as a matter of fact, 30% of the respondents actually answered correctly, but 70% did not. We have the choice experiment, which I'm going to explain, and then we ask about these new breeding technologies, what are their perceptions, why they like it, why they don't like it, ethical considerations, safety considerations, moral considerations, and things like that. We wanted to understand what are their perceptions on that. So here are the explanation of the treatments that we use. The group 1 was the control, and this was applied for both groups, for the dry cranberries and for the cranberry use. Group 2 received the positive information about cranberry to the health, and group 3 received, an information about the dietary effects of added sugars, and group 4 received a combination of positive and negative connotation information. So this is what we call discrete choice experiment. What we do in applied economics is to present the respondent a hypothetical case and tell them, imagine you are in the grocery store and you are in front of dry cranberries or cranberry juice, obviously depending on what survey they receive. So let's say dry cranberries, and you have 2 options in front of you. One with 14 grams reduced sugar content, and the other one with 29 sugar. One with a full intense flavor profile, and other one a bland weak flavor profile. One that it says it is bred by conventional breeding methods, and the other one bred by CRISPR, and one that costs $1.99 versus the other that costs $2.99. So obviously we have an explanation, because people don't know what is CRISPR, people don't know what is conventional breeding. So our breeders in the team, especially Juan, help us explaining in lay terms what is CRISPR, what is conventional breeding, and with the help of Amaya and other collaborators, we obtain this 14 versus 29, and if this set of attributes was the right set to include in the study. Okay, so we give them 2 options, okay, and I am here putting the example of the juice. In the juice, we give them 3 options, right? You have 100% juice, cocktail, juice blend with these characteristics associated each with a price. choose one. Okay, and we have this. We have a statistical experimental design where we have a random combination of the levels of these attributes. So and we repeat this like 12 times. So they have to answer the same questions 12 times, each time with a different combination of attributes and attribute levels, right? So not all the time they're going to have the full conventional 349. They could have a different combination that is dictated by a random orthogonal experimental design that is purely and based very rigorous statistic setting. Okay, so we have these and we have them choose one. Now, in applied economics, people are saying, other reviewers or our peer colleagues are saying that this might not be okay because, it's a hypothetical setting and people, when they are in front of a survey, they respond to these things different from what they would have do in reality if they are in the grocery store. Okay, so we use two techniques to mitigate what it is called in applied economics as hypothetical bias. So what we did was use what they call cheap talk, which is tell the consumer, look, we know that this is a hypothetical setting, but it will really help us if you please would respond as close as possible as you were in a really grocery store setting. That is one technique to mitigate this hypothetical bias. And the second technique was, and I did not include it here for a space, but we asked what we call certainty follow-up questions. Like after this question, they were presented with a question that says, in a scale of 1 to 10, how certain are you of your response? So whenever we receive all the responses, we correct for those who have expressed that they are not certain. Like we have a threshold of 7, being 1 not certain at all, 10 very certain. If they mark 7 or 7, 8, 9, or 10, then or if they mark less than 7, we corrected. We have a parameter in our equation model to correct for these uncertain versus certain responses. Okay, so we did all what statistically econometric methods we can do to have reliable responses. So this is what we obtain. In general, our set of respondents, and I have here for the sweet and dry cranberries and for the cranberry juice, in terms of gender, they were close to the US. In terms of age, they are, obviously we couldn't survey 18 or under, so there's a little skew towards the middle age, right? So the mean for our survey was around 40 years old. Another screening that I forgot to mention was that they should be in charge of the grocery shopping. So in general, right, it is the female, middle-aged household head who is in charge of the grocery shopping. And then we have years of college degree, the college degree. So we divided this, we converted this into a binary. So our sample, had more, was more likely to have a college degree than the general US population. Okay, in terms of income, we were reasonable distributed in terms of income. In general, our income range was in between 50 to 75,000 per household a year. Number of members, we had about half of our respondents, a little more than half, 56, 54, 60% of our respondents had more than 3 members, so 2 household heads and perhaps a child. And we also asked presence of children, and we have that more presence of children than general population. General population is 30%, 0.3. We had over 0.4, 0.43 is the lowest, 0.53 is the highest in terms of 43% of our respondents had more than one child under 18 years old in the household. Why this is important? Because purchase behavior is compartmentalized into if they purchase for some other member of the household, especially a kid, or if they purchase to consume themselves. So we did make that differentiation as well. So these are the results, and obviously these results are dense and difficult to understand. So this is what I am going to be presenting. So you see the bars going down. It is because our results were negative in terms of we compare them, because we compare them. For example, we compare regular sugar versus reduced sugar. So this negative 2.33 means that they were willing to pay 2.33 less for regular sugar compared to reduced sugar. So this blue bar is for the control sample. This red bar is for the group that received the information treatment that says that cranberries have a positive effect on the health. This bar that is green is the information treatment that increase awareness of effects of added sugars in the diet, so the negative. And then this purple one is the combination of 2 and 3. In general, what we see here is that when they are presented both sets of information, actually their willingness to discount or the willingness to pay less is, more prominent. The other one that we receive is contrary to what we were thinking. We were expecting, if they know that cranberries have a health implication or a positive health implication, this discount is going to be lower than the control. But that did not happen. That increased, right? For the 3 attributes that we are checking, which is something that interesting for us. And it was actually the effect of the added sugar was for the this is the willingness to pay for regular versus reduced. So here is more or less similar when they are told about the effects of dietary sugar on the health. So the positive and the negative are actually similar in terms of how much they are willing to pay for regular compared to reduced sugar content. About CRISPR, so the information about the health effects of cranberries actually increase or decrease the willingness to pay, right? They are willing to pay even less if they know that cranberries have positive health implications. So this is telling us that maybe knowing that it has health implications, they have an expectation that everything else will be, as they expect, conventional breeding, natural, etc. Right? So they were a little bit more rejectful when they told about the health implications. About the sugar content, this was similar to the control, and obviously the 2 pieces of information exacerbated their willingness to discount for this CRISPR. And for the flavor, these are the results. The 2 pieces of information exacerbated more the willingness to discount for a bland flavor. This is for sweet and dry cranberries. And these are the results for the cranberry use. And this is my summary, which cranberry use, as I told you, this was a different set of respondents, different screening criteria. These are folks that know the difference between the 100% juice, the cocktail, and the blend, the juice blend. So here, the discount for regular sugar compared to reduced sugar was again exacerbated if they knew about the health effects of cranberries. Yes, increase when the effect of the added sugar, and was not as large when the two information treatments were presented. In terms of CRISPR, again, the willingness to pay less for CRISPR was even larger when they knew about the positive health effects, was a little bit lower when they knew about the added sugar effects, and larger when they got both pieces of information. And similar trend for the full flavor, the bland wheat versus full flavor. So here, what we did in this part, we wanted to see the trade-off. So for every dollar they want to discount for regular sugar, how much they will be willing to discount for the CRISPR. So it was a ratio. What we estimated here was a ratio, and if the ratio was 1, the closest to 1 means that they were indifferent between regular sugar and CRISPR. But if the ratio is more than 1, it means that the willingness to pay, or the willingness, the discount for regular sugar actually is larger than the willingness to discount for CRISPR. So greater than 1 tell us that they will accept CRISPR if reduced sugar is involved, or in other words, they have more rejection towards a full regular content compared to the rejections they will have to CRISPR. So in SDC, all the values of these trade-offs across all the treatments, okay, every bar here, these bars are the treatments of the informations, but here you see that all these values are greater than 1, indicating that this set of consumers experience more rejection towards regular sugar than towards CRISPR. Okay, that was for the sweet and dry cranberries. And for the cranberry juice, it is not necessarily as pronounced as for the sweet and dry cranberries. Values are closer to 1 for these two treatment informations, and they are less than 1 for these other two, indicating that here they experience more rejection towards the the CRISPR than the regular content of sugar. Okay, so that is how do we interpret these two graphs. And again, remember that for the sweet and dry cranberries, these consumers are the one we mix here, the frequent and the occasional consumer of dry cranberries, right? They have consumed one at least once in the past year. However, this cranberry juice is the more loyal because this person knows the difference between 100% juice, the blend, and the cocktail. Now, latent class analysis. So this latent class analysis is what we were talking about. Not all consumers are the same, right? There is some heterogeneity in the preferences, in the willingness to pay for these different attributes across our little sample of consumers, right? So we do some statistical, deeper investigation, use statistical methods to find commonalities about how people are responding and identify what we call classes or groups. So for the sweet and dry cranberries, these are 1,000 individuals. I'm sorry, these are only 250 individuals because we only use the control here. If we use the information treatments, we will have confounded the effect of the information treatment with the effect of the different causes, the reasons for which this heterogeneity happened. So we decided just to focus on the control group, the one who did not receive any additional information about health effects or dietary effects of added sugars. Okay, so this is the control, 250 people, and we, our statistical model informed us that there are 3 different groups. And I am here showing these, especially for their attitudes towards CRISPR. So here you have this negative 1.37 for group 1, which is 41% of my sample. Then I have negative 0.45, which is 23% of my sample, and then a positive 43, which is 35% of my sample. What is this number telling me? Well, this is negative, and the magnitude here is larger than here. So these guys, we call them the ones who strongly reject CRISPR compared to conventional breeding. These group 2 are the ones who have a weak rejection of CRISPR compared to conventional breeders, and this group 3 is actually the one that prefers CRISPR to conventional breeding. So 35% of our sample actually were willing to pay a price premium for CRISPR compared to conventional breeding. So these results tell us that not all consumers are the same. There are different levels of acceptance or rejection of CRISPR compared to conventional breeding across our sample that we survey. And this is similar for, okay, so here what we are saying is, who are these people? Who are these guys who were weakly rejecting CRISPR or actually preferring CRISPR? So we focus on this group 3, the ones who actually prefer CRISPR to conventional breeding. And I put in red all the variables that were statistically significant for all these differences, okay? So we put all the, what we did here was put all the variables, all the responses to the questions we asked in the survey in terms of sociodemographics, in terms of purchase habits, motivations to consume cranberries, positions about scientific discoveries, etc. So all the universe of variables, these are the ones that resulted statistically significant, that are telling us something. Obviously, we don't have a really clear, consistent message, but in general, we can say that those who accepted CRISPR bred or prefer CRISPR bred compared to conventional breeding for sweet and dry cranberries were those who had a higher proportion of higher household incomes. Actually, were those who did not interpret it correctly, the total sugar and the added sugar, okay, did not interpret it correctly. Recall, we asked a question about what is your interpretation of total sugar versus added sugar, and these guys did not interpret it correctly, so there must be some confusion, some noise in how they understand what is added versus total. We presented also in the survey something that is called a heat map, wherever we tell the respondent, press on the area of the nutrition fact panels that most draws your attention, right? So we can capture what part of the nutrition fact panel grabs more attention to the consumer. And actually, these folks who wanted to pay a premium from CRISPR are the ones who put the lowest attention to total sugars, okay? And then we also ask, hey, what are your motivations to consume cranberry products? And those who put health and nutrition is my main motivation to consume cranberry products are the ones who moderate, the ones who are willing to pay a premium. So moderate higher assign importance. So I have 0.54, but compared to the 0.92 here, 0.54 compared to the 0.92, this magnitude is larger, indicating that those who weakly reject have a strong motive for health and nutrition. These have a weak, but still higher than this base, the ones who strongly reject. So that's what I put, moderate higher importance assigned to health motives when buying cranberry products. And then when we ask questions about perceptions on CRISPR, we ask different questions like, are you willing to buy CRISPR food if this will imply that the crop will be more resistant to insect pests and herbicides, therefore the need to apply less chemicals? And they actually say yes. So they are willing to accept CRISPR if the benefit that CRISPR involves is less chemical applications. We also ask, are you willing to purchase CRISPR if this increases the nutrient content in the food? And actually they say no, not necessarily, no. So negative compared to those who weakly resist, who strongly reject. And we ask, willingness, are you willing to purchase CRISPR if this reduces the need to add other sugars in the food? And this actually gets to be very positive. So yes, the ones who accept CRISPR are really willing to buy it if this will imply the reducing the need to add sugars in food processing. Okay, so there are some noise in our results, but in general, this might be the profile of people who are willing to accept CRISPR bred cranberry, sweet and dry. On the cranberry use, we find also 3 groups, okay? But here, if you see the magnitudes of my parameters here, we don't have, so this class 3, we don't have one that it is positive, saying that, okay, these 3 groups really didn't want to accept or pay a premium for CRISPR compared to conventional breeding. There are different degrees of rejection though, because this one said 0.76 and this one is 0.35. So I interpret this as class 1 strongly rejects, class 2 mildly or weakly or moderately rejects. And these guys, this does not have this little asterisk next to this number, which indicates this parameter is not statistically significant different from 0, indicating that these guys were indifferent. So it is the same for them if they have CRISPR or conventionally bred. And these guys were 19% of the 500 folks that we surveyed. So 19% were indifferent, 24% strongly rejected, 56% moderately rejected, and 19% indifferent. So here in the cranberry use, there was not a group that accepted, as in sweet and dry cranberries, there was a group that was indifferent, okay? And I attribute these differences to the loyalty to the product. The dry, sweet and dry we mix occasional with frequent. For the cranberry use, we focus on the ones who more frequently consume cranberry juice and they're knowledgeable because they knew the difference between cocktail 100% and the blend. Okay, so based on that, I'm going to present who are these guys, who are the ones who are indifferent. I'm going to focus on the ones that, that were indifferent. So here we have, again, higher income. It was those with higher income in my sample are the ones who are indifferent towards CRISPR bred and conventionally bred. In terms of added sugar information, and here you're going to see different set of variables because there were variables that were statistically significant. The group of variables that were statistically significant for the sweet and dry cranberry group was different for the cranberry use. Okay, there is not much commonality. The one commonality between those two groups, remember these were two different groups of people, was the income. So higher income in both groups imply more acceptance or less rejection to CRISPR. But here we ask how important are different pieces of information in the nutrition fact panel, and the group that are indifferent had a moderate, less importance assigned to added sugar. So yeah, they see it, but it is not that like the main focus when they are deciding to buy cranberry juice. They really don't pay much attention or don't put that much importance to the intensity perceived of cranberry flavor when drinking the cranberry juice. Interestingly, this group that was indifferent and also those who weakly rejected class 2, we ask, Do you know if CRISPR and GMO are different? Or do you know, or what is your position? And these ones are the ones who responded that CRISPR and GMO are different, and they know what was their difference, because there was another group that said, I know they are different, but I don't know what is the difference. And then there was another group that said, no, there's no differences between CRISPR and GMO. We wanted to see how much the distance they put from CRISPR and GMO. So this group, the ones who are indifferent, they were knowledgeable, at least self-reported knowledgeable, that they say, yes, they're different, and I know what's that difference. And then we ask, would you willing to purchase CRISPR foods if they imply less chemical applications? Were you willing to purchase CRISPR foods if they increase the nutrient content? And this question asks, you're willing to purchase CRISPR foods if CRISPR foods is the only information you have, no benefits associated, that's the only thing. And they actually there were less proportion of these people. So these who were indifferent actually would like to have additional information about the benefits associated with CRISPR. Okay? So take-home message, willingness to pay for total sugar content and information effects. Respondents were willing to pay less for regular compared to reduced sugar content in both sweet and dry and cranberry juice. Okay, willing to pay less for regular compared to reduced sugar content. Now, the effect of the different information treatments varied across the products. For the sweet and dry, providing information about the health benefits of cranberries didn't change the willingness to pay. They were indifferent. But when they were informed about the dietary effects of sugar, alone or in combination with information about cranberry benefits, they were willing to pay less for the product compared to the no information or the control group. Okay? So, and then for the cranberry use, only when they received the combined information, respondents were willing to pay less compared to the control. So there were differences in the effects of this additional information on how they perceive the reduced sugar and the CRISPR. Now, willingness to pay for the CRISPR. People were willing to pay less, okay, for CRISPR bread in both dry cranberries and cranberry juice. When we estimated consistently the attributes by separate, yes, CRISPR received a discount on average, right? However, when we had the different information treatments in the sweet and dry cranberries, the information didn't change the willingness to pay for CRISPR. In the juice, yes, telling them about the dietary effects of sugar and the combined health benefits and the dietary effects, when we combine those two pieces of information, reduce the willingness to pay for CRISPR compared to the control group. When analyzed as a bundle, okay, when we analyze as a bundle, not disaggregated by the entire product, in general, people were willing to pay a premium for the CRISPR bread if it's associated with reduced sugar and an intense flavor in both SDC and cranberry juice. Okay, so this is telling us if consumers don't like CRISPR itself, when they come in a bundle, when they are associated with a benefit like reduced sugar, they might be willing to accept it. Now, not all our respondents were the same. We investigated the presence of segments, and we actually identified 3 segments in both groups of respondents, for the sweet and dry cranberries and for the cranberry juice. Remember, we focused this segmentation or Latin class analysis only in the control group, okay? So it's only 250 people. So for the sweet and dry cranberries, we identified 35% of the respondents were actually willing to pay more for CRISPR than for the conventionally bred, okay? And for the cranberry use, actually, there was not a group that was willing to pay more for CRISPR, but there was a group, 19%, that was indifferent between CRISPR and conventionally bred. That is all what I have to present. Thank you so much. And if there are any questions, I'll be glad to respond.
Thank you, Karina, for an incredibly interesting study and results. I see that there's already a question here on the chat from Sear. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. But in the meantime, if you have questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat. Also, Michael just put a message there. We sent a survey. Everything is surveyed the same way as Karina's study. If you can please provide us some feedback from this great webinar that Karina just presented, we would really, really appreciate the feedback. Okay, so here's the question. Hi, Karina. I might have missed it, but what percentage of your 2,000 participants considered CRISPR equal to GMO or knew what CRISPR was? How does the FDA, USDA, or equivalent in Europe classify CRISPR? And were your participants from all across the US or more local?
Yeah, so I have that number, but I don't have it on top of my head. But yes, we asked that question of, do you consider CRISPR, do you know what is CRISPR? Do you consider CRISPR different from GMO, as I explained, and that stuff? I apologize, I did not present that slide, but if you follow up to me, I don't know if you can have my email. Please send me an email. I have that piece of information available, and it's actually in the paper that it is published too, because this study is already published. So yes, the second question was about the regulations from the USDA. Yeah, so yes. In 2018, I believe there was an announcement that CRISPR was not going to be regulated different than conventionally bred products, and actually if it was CRISPR bred, you can say it is organic and things like that. But then Massimo, the lead PI of this grant, actually made me aware that it is not necessarily the case, that it is mostly a case-by-case issue. Like, for example, if in the production manipulation of insect pests are done, then APHIS needs to have some sort of approval, or FDA or EPA too. So there are at least three instances, that three entities, three institutions that are going to approve, and it depends on what type of manipulation or what type of modification has done. So it's not one shoe fits everybody. I believe it's gonna be on a case by case. I forgot the third one. It's about Europe.
It's whether you know what is going to be the equivalent. How will Europe classify products that might be like CRISPR products?
I think that unfortunately Europe is equaling CRISPR to GMO. I think that's what I heard. I need to double check that. So yes, I think that is the case. It is. They are not as open as the US is. Even though we also ask, we will have certain hope that they will be more acceptance, especially Europe, because Emmanuel Charpentier, one of the two scientists that were awarded the Nobel Prize along with Jennifer Doudman, is from France, right? So maybe they were going to be more acceptant, but I think growers in Europe are more acceptant. They are willing to this technology to be adopted, by there needs to be some work in the policy level.
Okay, and then the follow-up question is, where were your participants from? Were they from across the entire country, or were they more local?
Yes, I did not show that, but we asked Qualtrics to show us a really close representation of the distribution of population across the US. So from the Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, South, and West and Northwest. Yes, it was a very general representation of all the regions in the United States, and both rural and urban as well.
So before I read the next question, I want to just make a clarification, and Karina did mention this. Our project VacCAP is not working at all either on GMO or CRISPR. We are not working on that in our project. This is just a study, a survey to try to understand whether the consumer accepts these new technologies or not, but we are not directly working with either one of these technologies. All right, so the next question says, Karina, are you aware about any other similar CRISPR customer acceptance service with fresh fruit, such as fresh berries?
Fresh berries, no. I did a study on table grapes and I got similar results. I did also a Latin class segmentation, and yes, there is about 30%, 20% that are willing to accept, and we have our 20% that are strong rejectors. And that is a common finding in all these other crops, right? That we find that the core rejectors, the ones who really have negative connotation or negative perceptions, the strong negative perceptions about GMO, are still gonna not accept any other innovative breeding technology, even though they are explained that they are not the same, etc.
Perfect. I don't see any more questions from the chat, but we'll just give a couple of minutes. If anybody still has another question for Karina that they want to just type in the chat there. I'm also going to put here in the chat where the recording for this webinar will be posted. If you want to go back and review some of what Karina presented today, you can go back and look at our recording in our YouTube channel. Okay, so here's another question. It says, in your opinion, what was the least surprising result and what was the most surprising result?
Yeah, the most surprising result, and we were expecting, and actually Amaya was involved, is like we were expecting that the health information, like putting really emphasizing and increasing the awareness of the health benefits associated with cranberries will diminish the discounts, right, for regular sugar for regular sugar compared to reduced sugar. We also did another study where we actually ask about added sugars directly. It is not this study, it's a different study. And that did not mitigate the discount. So even though they know this is a really healthy product, really good benefit, superfood, but if they have the added sugars, people are still willing to discount for those added sugars or for those regular sugar content, unfortunately. So that was surprising to us.
Yeah, that was one of our original theories, that if we were to supplement information to the consumer that cranberries are very healthy and have a huge benefit for your health, they wouldn't care so much about the added sugar. But we were surprised to learn that that is actually not the case.
Yeah, we did not mitigate the willingness to discount for that. Yeah.
What do you think it was the least surprising? There was something that we expected and we actually did see what we expected?
The heterogeneity in the respondents. Not everybody is the same. Everybody has different information. Something important, something that is not surprising and really consistent with other is like people who self-report they know about GMO, about breeding, about CRISPR are the ones who are more acceptant. So here is the role of how do we communicate science to the consumer, to the general consumer, and the importance of communicating actual facts, objective science, in a way that the consumers will understand and will identify with, not using a scientific jargon and stuff like that. There are also studies that test different ways of communication. In a world of fake news, we need the scientific community need to be on top of that, right? So communicate, because those who are more informed are less rejectful of these new breeding technologies.
We have another question. Says, thank you for your presentation. In the study, during the education phase, did you clearly connect the use of the CRISPR technology to directly create lower sugar cranberry options?
No, we did not do that. Yeah, we just gave a really explanation of what was CRISPR. Yes, we did not do that. We did not do that. Yeah, we work with Juan Salapa, the cranberry CRISPR, And yes, we did not do that. And mainly because there are no, to my knowledge, at least in 2020, there were no works of CRISPR applications to cranberry, so we did not want to go into that. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, it's 7 minutes past the hour. It was a great presentation, and thank you to everybody for the questions. And Karina, thank you for answering all of them and all your clarifications about your study. It was a great study. Again, I posted there in the chat, and I'm going to do it once again. If anybody wants to go and see the recording, that's where they're going to be. We really want to thank you, Karina, for taking the time to share with us all the results of this great study. And thank everybody that participated in the webinar. And please answer our survey.
Thank you.